though, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. We will kick off the group and hand it off to you, David.
All right. How's everyone doing? Well, I guess you're all on mute, so never mind. Don't answer that. We're all doing great this morning. So PrimeCo is we'll call it a medium regional contracting firm. We're based out of San Diego. And we,
look at all these people on here.
Good gosh. Holy moly.
Hey, Joseph, do you mind muting yourself?
Oh, sorry.
We'll have plenty of time to talk after the presentation, so don't worry.
You want to go to the next slide, Kelsey? So what our company does is we specifically specialize in exterior envelope reconstruction. So we don't really build anything out of the ground. We take pre-existing structures that have been maybe not maintained, maybe have had just a bad shot at their run, and we reconstruct them and transform them. So all our work is primarily exterior envelope work based in San Diego, and we basically work from the northern LA border all the way down to the border with Mexico and both sides of the state. So our vision statement is written here. We do not have a mission statement or anything really else. We kind of just live by this one sentence, which is our clients drive us, our people define us, our process distinguishes us. We are building the curve. That last section, our process distinguishes us, is really kind of what we're going to talk about today, because that's where we leverage Smartsheet as one of our technology stacks. And next slide. So the first thing I wanted to touch on, because I think this is important, is we use workspaces heavily, and we organize them in such a fashion to maintain as best data integrity as possible. So basically all the core data tables that are used to do all our pivots, all our dynamic views, our calendar apps, all the data we don't want people to go in and manipulate because it's being pulled from other sources, we keep in an administrative workspace, and very few people have access to that. And then we have workspaces depending on what part of the business that you're functioning in. So I just want to briefly touch on that. Next slide.
Oh yeah, I have one quick question for you, David.
Yeah.
You know, you've put together this workspace and it looks great. How long did it take you to, put the process together to have this order in this way?
Oh, it went through about 4 iterations over the course of about 2 years for me to get it right, which is kind of why I wanted to bring it up. Maybe you don't need to spend 2 years doing it, but it took me trial and error about 2 years messing around to get it to where it's well organized and it works.
Awesome. Yeah, no, and from my own experience, it took me about 2 years to get my workspace in order. So totally understand. And I thought it'd be helpful for people to hear who maybe are new on their journey and maybe frustrated or haven't thought about it. To put a little thought into it early will make a big difference.
It does. It does. Next slide. So when we originally started using Smartsheet at PrimeCo, which was about 3 years ago, I've been a user for about 10 years now. We had workspaces, and then people would go into workspaces and look at different sheets. And what we found is there was a lot of misdirection on where to find stuff, where to go. So what we decided to do is give everyone a dashboard that everyone has access to. It's done by user rights, and it gives basically a link to another dashboard within it that takes them where they need to go. So if everyone starts here at our PrimeCo dashboard, if they're in the BD team, they click on that and it takes them to another dashboard that allows them to find the sheets that are applicable to them. Pre-construction, production, finance, and then we do a lot of continuing education. So we have a link there that links out of Smartsheet to LinkedIn Learning, different courses that we have hosted on other places. And then we actually took all the books that we own as a company and put them in a library that you can go click on a book and check it out from the library. So we know who has it and who needs to bring it back. And we can hop over to the next slide and we'll drill down into the operations or the production dashboard. This is actually part of the operations portal. So this again is a dashboard within a dashboard. So you click on one of the links and it will take you, or images, it'll take you to the next dashboard. If we go to the next slide, then we get to an operations portal. Now, this portal basically is what our COO used. We built it specifically for him, and it shows how much revenue we're on track to do this month, what's projected off of all the data in Smartsheet, what's projected off just what we did this month so far, what the change on a day-to-day basis is, the change in gross margin dollars and percentage. It shows all that in just one snapshot. And then if there's an error or a problem that he notices in those key metrics, he can drill into one of these icons below. So if we move to the next slide, we'll see this is within that trend icon. So this actually shows him what we did in revenue day by day with two trend lines. One is taking all of the data from this month and trending it, and the other is taking all of the data from the past year and trending it. So typically what we found is this is pretty darn accurate, and that blue line at the end of the month will end typically somewhere between the red and the yellow line. If we hop over to the next slide, and then we do a backlog trend. And so this is same thing. We take all our backlog data, a new contract gets written, gets put into the system. It instantly goes to backlog not in production. We haven't started the job. And then as we start that job, put boots on the ground in production, and then we have our total backlog. And those trend over time, so we can see if the backlog's heading in the right direction, depending on the season we're in, or if it's heading in the wrong direction and we need to ramp up sales. We can hop over to the next slide. So how we did some of these is we take all of our data from all of our projects, and I have an example, schedule and budget in here, rolls up into a master data table that's our work in progress or our WIP. And it has the who wrote the estimate, who the PM is, who the foreman is, what the contract value is, pretty much every metric we could think of, including what vertical is it in, what work type are we doing. And then we pivot all that data to aggregate it down into lump totals. So what's our total contract for this vertical or this work type? And then we take that pivot report, and I believe the very next slide will show this, and we write an automation that says, take this row of data, whether it's the total or just that vertical, and make a copy of it to another sheet every single day. So what we can do now is we'll end up with a sheet that has 365 entries for a calendar year, and it'll show the change over time of any given metric based on our WIP. So we can go do a look back and say, okay, what did this look like over the course of all of last year in this specific vertical? And is that what we want to be seeing? Is it trending in the right direction? Is it not? How do we change that? We do this with our gross margin by vertical. And that's really what we hone in on at the executive team is we expect, based on historical evidence, certain margins in certain trades. If they start trending in a wrong direction, our guys, maybe they're not trained as well as they need to be. Maybe we're having quality control issues. Maybe there's supervision issues, but it gives us a point to look at to start digging deeper into those conversations.
I have a question for you, David. Brian asked, who maintains this information? So is it one person, or is it different people updating different information?
So the project managers create a budget and a schedule, an SOV, and a work installation plan for every job. I then go in and make a link from that data to the WIP. As long as the project manager does their job by updating the schedule and the budget on a daily basis, which is what they're supposed to do, the data is updated through that mechanism. From a maintenance standpoint, there is one thing to be careful of. The WIP that we have used to be massive. We've actually trimmed it down because we collected some stuff that just didn't need to be collected. So it makes a copy every single day of itself. That copy will fill up a sheet. It'll hit the row and cell maximums in about 35 days. So we basically make a copy of that data every month, and we save it as a new sheet titled this month, this year, and then clean out the old one, because we're collecting so much data on a monthly basis that we actually exceed a sheet capacity for a given sheet. So that maintenance is done by me. And I literally do it once a month. I go in, I make a copy, and then clean out the old sheet and comb through the data, look at how we did. It's part of my monthly review. I see a question down here that says, what is sheet capacity? So it's 20,000 rows of data or 500,000 cells. Now, I never hit the 20,000 rows because I always hit the 500,000 cells long before that, because my WIP report is about 100 columns wide, and that's why I hit the 500,000 first. It's a lot of data that we track, though. If we hop to the next slide, and I'll kind of give an insight on why we track what we track, because there's future projects that we've kind of built in. Okay, so this is that automation on the previous slide. This is what it looks like copied into just a static database sheet. And then we take this data and we run reports. So we'll make a report that says, we just want to see HOA vertical. And then you can take that report, build a visualization in a dashboard, and it'll pick up that and make you a trend line just off that data. It's pretty clean and simple. If we hop over to the next slide.
Hey, I have a quick question for you, David. So somebody asked, how do you communicate information to field personnel, laborers, et cetera? Do they have access to Smartsheet? And if so, do they just use their personal devices, company provided devices? Is it mostly like mobile or?
Yeah, so that's a great question. All of our superintendents have a company device, and they have pretty high level access to all this data. I think they're at a commenter permission level, so they're not just a viewer. And then our foremen, we give them a cell phone allowance, so they actually use their personal device, and they have a viewer only permission level to all this data. And so they actually, when we finish writing an estimate, we've made a sale, we're ready to actually start the project, we'll have a handoff meeting with all the teams, so the pre-construction team and the production team, and we'll look through the schedule, the budget, the work installation plan, the SOV. There's some ancillary data that's not in Smartsheet, like a site map, and if there's building plans for some of the work we do, we'll go over all that. And then as they do their work, they actually fill out a form every single day, and they fill out a daily field report that tells us how many hours they worked, total man hours, what part of the project they worked on, what they accomplished, were there any accidents, did you have a safety meeting, all the stuff that we need to track as a construction company on a daily basis. They fill that out in a Smartsheet form, and it actually gets kicked over based on the job number. It actually does an index match over to the WIP, finds out who the project manager is, and then alerts them that a new DFR has been sent to them from the field. They pick up that data, and that's how they update their schedules and budgets. Here's another example of a dashboard within a dashboard. Next slide. This goes to there. So we do trends. This is another example of a trend we do, and this is at the project manager level. So these are two of our project managers, and you can see that big blue dip there on Elizabeth's trend. That's actually, the job did not actually do that, or all her aggregate projects did not take a random loss for one point in time and move up. What happened was, she's actually relatively new with the company. She updated all her budgets, and she didn't update her schedule. So the percent complete of her job didn't go up, but the cost did, which made her gross margin on all her projects skyrocket downwards. This trend helped us catch that pretty instantaneously, because we fixed it in about a day, where we saw this and was like, okay, either all hell broke loose and we're bleeding money on all of her jobs, or there's a simple data entry error. And really what it was is she forgot to update her percent completes, but she updated all her cost. It's one of the beauties of being able to track things on a trend line, is being able to see stuff as it's happening. Next slide. And then we leverage calendar app. We take all of in our WIP, we store because it's linked into this, it's linked from the schedule to the WIP. It has the day the job starts and the day the job should end based on our schedule. We take those core rows or columns and we feed them into Calendar app, and we publish a calendar based on the county and the work type we're doing, so that our general superintendent, his main task and job is controlling manpower. He can look at this and see when there's going to be a gap on a given trade in a given county and figure out how to either reallocate those guys to a different county or a different project, or come yell at me and tell me that the sales team needs to find him a job to put guys on, which is the latter is what typically happens. And this is actually being fine-tuned. It's on the table for Q1 to fine tune this even more, to tell us what the workforce needs are on a given job and codify them that way, so that he can actually look at, okay, for the next, 2 months, I'm good with the current crew I have, but 3 months from now, I'm going to need to add 5 staff members in this particular area. And then the conversation for us becomes, okay, can we sustain those 5 extra guys? Because the last thing we want to do is hire 5 guys and then have to let them go. We'd much rather go to the client and say, your job's going to take an extra month than, so really what this helps is multiple teams. It helps our marketing department, our pre-construction department, and our operations department, because they all need to be on the same page with how we're going to staff stuff. As our backlog grows, our staff needs to grow, but we can't grow either of them not in sync of each other.
And I just want to make it clear for everyone. So there is a calendar view inside the sheet. So you can go Gantt view, calendar view, but calendar app is something separate that you would add to your account. So either you already have it and you can see that in your launcher, or it's something that you'd have to talk to your account team about adding.
Yes, that is correct. It is a special little add-on, and we like it. We enjoy it. And you can use it for a bunch of stuff. I've seen teams use it for marketing, bid tracking, all kinds of fun stuff. We can hop over to the next slide. So this is a example. This is all fake data. I'm going to preface that. I built this just for this user group. So it's just mock data. It's not real. But this is what our schedule template looks like. So there's a few hidden columns because it would have made it too convoluted, but we do use a work breakdown structure. And there's a formula to have that automatically done. You just need to it's 3 helper columns. If anyone wants that formula, let the Smartsheet team know and I can copy and paste it and send it along. But you have the schedule, the percent complete, the duration, the start and the finish. Then we have our Gantt view. We use the baseline feature. I don't know if anyone else has used it. We love the baseline feature because as soon as we start a project, we toggle on baselines and we actually track as a KPI for our field teams and our project management teams what the variance to schedule is. Found historically that the easiest way to lose money on a job is to have it take too long. So it's a great feature. It's one of my favorite newer features to Smartsheet. We can hop over to the next slide.
And just touching on the baselines, it was added pretty recently to Smartsheet. And so maybe it's something you didn't notice, but it is something you can find in your Gantt view, and you can just click the button that says create baseline. But you do need date columns to do that.
Yes. And we've tracked baselines in Smartsheet for about 2 years now. The baselines feature just made it amazingly seamless because we used to add 2-3 extra columns, an original start date, or a baseline start, baseline finish, and a variance. And we'd write those formulas in manually. And so we've always tracked it, just now it's a button and the PMs love it because it took a chunk of work off of them. What you're looking at here, you probably can't see because it's a lot in one shot, but this is what our budgets look like. So our budgets basically have a budget column for the 5 major categories of costs that we have, which is labor, material, subcontractor, equipment, and other. And then we have an actual column. So we build our budget out, and then as data comes in from the field, from our vendors, we input into each line item the actual cost. And that's done on a daily basis, or what the cadence is for the equipment and stuff like that. So with the budget, we also have, this is an interesting feature that we've played around with, and it works pretty well. You can't see it in this sheet because it was hard to capture, but the sheet summary for all of our budgets and schedules, we actually use as a settings panel. So if you click the sheet summary, it'll slide out from the side and it'll ask you, what's the sales tax for this job? And then it'll take your material and it'll add the sales tax to it. You know, what's the contingency that the estimator put on the job? And it'll fill out that contingency column, the escalation columns, which now during the time we're in are more important than ever. So we use that slide out sheet summary as our settings panel, and we actually use it to set baselines. So when a project's launched from pre-construction, they create a budget based on the exact estimate, and then they set a baseline based on that. From there, the PM takes it, modifies it, tweaks it, gets into the weeds with the field team, and he'll change the budget and set a baseline to the project manager. So we end up with basically 3 copies of the budget, and we can track variances between the 3. And then Project X, this is our SOV. So this is a report that comes directly out of our estimating suite, and we copy and paste it in here. We take the percent completes and we link those in to the budget. And then as the budget is updated and the schedule is updated by the project manager, it updates an SOV, and our billing department logs in. They go just to this one report and they figure out how much they need to bill the client within the cadence that they get billed. We have clients that are billed every 15 days, 30 days, 45 days, 60 days. So they track when they need to bill. They come to the SOV, they grab the number, they send an invoice. It shouldn't be disputed because most of our schedules and budgets not so much, but the schedules, most of them we actually share out to the client so they can see and agree on what the percent complete of a given task is.
And do you share the sheet with them, or do you put that on a dashboard, or do you put that into a report?
So typically what we'll do is we'll either email them PDF copies, which is what most of our clients want. We have some clients that are pretty tech savvy, and we love those clients because we'll take our schedule and we'll make a copy of it and we'll put it up in a workspace and we'll share it directly to the client, and we'll link the project manager's schedule to that one. So they're carbon copies. So they have access to one, they can comment, do all their stuff. And we maintain some data integrity that way. There's no leakage they can't go in and mess with our stuff, but they still get the illusion that they have pretty complete control over it.
And quick question for the PDFs, are you using Document Builder for that?
No, for this. So we have dabbled in Document Builder, and we actually have used it in beta testing for a different application. But for sharing schedules, we just send them the PDF of the Gantt with the columns they need to see: start date, end date, duration, percent complete. And we send them that PDF. For Document Builder, what we've actually done is when we do our handoff meetings, there's a document embedded in the top line of the budget. And if you click generate documents, it'll take all the main categories and say, okay, everyone in the room agreed you're only going to use 1,000 hours, $5,000 in material, $10,000 in subcontractor, $1,000 in equipment. And then we print that and have everyone sign off on it. And then we have a record that everyone sat in a room and agreed to this budget. So when they don't achieve that budget, we have a document we can reference back to and say, okay, what went wrong? Because what we want to make sure there isn't any of is we don't want any finger pointing on any of the teams. We want to be able to sit everyone down and say, let's cut through the bullshit, get to brass tacks. You all agreed to this. So now we need to discuss in an honest, open debate what went wrong, because we know it didn't happen at the handoff meeting because you all agreed to this budget. So now it's just a matter of figuring out a solution to what happened. We don't really care too much about why a job had, a failure of bringing in the profit that it was expected to. What we're more concerned about is what's the solution so it doesn't happen again. It happened. I can't change that. Let's figure out how to fix it. Oh, look at that. We're at the end of my slides. So there's a couple things on here. Sticking to timelines, I think we covered that. Budget, schedule, process. So this second to last slide, the reason we track our estimating baselines, our project management baselines, and the final budget separately is we track and do performance metrics across those 3 different departments with a variance. So if an estimator says you can do the job in 1,000 hours and it takes you 1,100, but the PM said you can do it in 1,125 and it took 1,100, there's 2 different variances, and we're looking for a different set of variances from each team. On top of that, probably one of the capstone projects for us in 2022 is we're slowly taking all this data and aggregating it by a CSI division code so that we can come up with historical costs. So we can actually look at a job that we're bidding and say, hey, we did a job that had 12 3-story buildings on it 2 years ago, and our cost per square foot on waterproofing was X. This new bid's cost per waterproofing per square foot is Y. Their 3.5% difference in the upward direction, is that the escalation factor that we should have seen, or the inflation factor between those 2 points in time? If the answer is yes, it gives us a higher degree of confidence that we're bidding the jobs at the right number, that we know we can perform profitably and actually go out and succeed. And so that's kind of the models that we're trying to build, is more being able to use all this data so that we can look into the future and be more confident in our decision makings. I will say we also use, on top of Pivot and Calendar, we use Dynamic View. And what we find Dynamic View is great for, if you don't know what it does, I made the mistake of purchasing it thinking it did something totally different. I opened it up, was like, what the hell did I do? And then realized what it actually can do, which is it is amazing for keeping your data safe and keeping the integrity of that data. So we take our contracts, our WIP, all those different core chunks of data, our field reports, all that stuff, and we share it to everyone through Dynamic View, and we give them access to only small chunks of data to edit. They can view all the data all day long, and they can have pretty deep access to it, but they can't go in there and manipulate or change something we don't want them to, which maintains the integrity of our entire data set.
So we have a ton of great questions for you, David. And the number one question asked so far is your accounting system linked to Smartsheet?
No, and that is intentional. So this has been a long, hard-fought debate between multiple departments. Our accounting software is entirely unlinked to Smartsheet. So theoretically, we keep track of all our jobs through our accounting system, and we look at the gross profit and margin over there as well as in Smartsheet. The reason they're not connected is because it allows me to go to the project managers and ask them why they're missing job costs on their projects. If we linked the two together, they wouldn't actually have to do as much management on their jobs and look into the actual data. They would just assume it's always correct because it's coming straight from accounting. So it allows us to catch more errors, and there's not a lot of errors. It just allows us to catch them better. And it forces the project managers to actually go out and investigate and do their job. And that is our core reason why they're not linked. And it was a conscious decision. Could we link them? Yes. Did we? No.
No, that's a great way of looking at it, though. And I think that's really insightful. There's a question, are you using an ERP?
No, we are not. So we actually cut down our tech stack started about 2 years ago, and we've whittled it down to basically one software platform per department. And we use those 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's it. There's really no ERP that we see necessary. Smartsheet does pretty much, it's the gap. It bridges the gap between the departments. Where
do you have a different sheet for each project and on the budget, or do you use a different sheet for each project budget, or combine them all in one?
No, there's actually a workspace. In that workspace is folders. There's a folder for every job. In that folder, there's a schedule, a budget, an SOV, a work installation plan, and then a series of reports based on all that data. And those reports are really what the field guys reference. If you were to open up the WIP or the budget as a foreman, you would just turn it right off and walk away and be like, I'm not going to deal with this. It's too much data for them. So they have reports that just give them the core information they need, right? They need to know what tasks they're doing, the amount of hours they need to do those tasks in, and the amount of material they need to use for a given task. They don't need more than that at the foreman level. Superintendent has a report with a little more data. The PM has the report with all the data based on their job function. That's how it's set up.
Are you able to write proposals in Smartsheet so it can be tracked in the biz dev phase? Or do you use an outside program for that, for the proposals?
So for writing proposals, could you? Yes. Would you want to? I'm not sure. You would be limited to using document generator and 200 sets of 200 basically fields. So if you made a PDF and you could do an entire proposal in 200 fields, then yeah, you could use it to do that. We take a different approach. Our proposals are generated out of our estimating platform. And when a contract is signed, it goes into Smartsheet as a signed contract in a contract management database that we have set up. And it triggers a series of workflows that tip off the project manager, the COO, the biz dev person, all those different people then get involved. They use dynamic view to fill out their little sections of the project. And by the time everyone's done, we're ready to have a handoff meeting. We do use a CRM that's outside of Smartsheet to track our business development. And I mean, if anyone wants to know, we use HubSpot. We enjoy it. It
And what
doesn't
do you-
rank as high as Smartsheet on my list, but it's close.
And then we've had multiple people asking the accounting software that you use, if you don't mind answering. You don't have to, by any means.
No, I'll gladly answer that. Because we don't need a whole lot of tools from our accounting software, because we have covered all those gaps with Smartsheet, we just went straight QuickBooks Online, and we just use it basically as a financial warehouse. We put our jobs in there, we cost our material, labor, sub other, and that's all we use it for, is to track cash in, cash out, what went to a job, what didn't, what's our overhead. We build everything else that's as far as job costing trends and analytics. We build that in Smartsheet. We do reconcile the two at the end of each project. And we reconcile both systems once a quarter as part of our executive financial review, because it allows us to dig into the actual finances and make sure everything's going smoothly. We always end up with an insight on a tweak or a change to the process we need to make by doing it that way. It's another reason we keep the two separate.
And then just going off of somebody's question, you don't use Control Center. Do you keep templates for all the different sheets that you have?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we update those templates. If you ask my PMs, they would tell you we update them too much. If you ask me, I would say we don't do it enough, but we do update the templates every time we enlist a new tool. We have actually, it's on the books right now to move forward with Control Center in 2022, specifically because we've built some mock dashboards on a job by job basis, which use some pretty intense sheets and functions by doing burn downs and stuff, which on the larger projects will help. And the average project we're doing is getting bigger and bigger. So we have decided that we'll most likely move forward with Control Center in 2022 to streamline that process.
Awesome. All right. So we do have, oh, go ahead.
I have a closing thought, and I wrote this in my notes and it just popped into my head. Okay. So this, when it comes to any software or any system that's designed to have data put into it so that you can yield results out of it, this is my biggest cautionary tale. Before you create a sheet or a data table or do a trend line or look at all this stuff and say, I'm going to go build a WIP report that has 200 columns, I'm going to track them all on a day-to-day basis. Before you do that, ask yourself what actions you want to be able to take based on the data. If you can't answer that question, then it's not worth spending the time tracking the data. What we've made the mistake of tracking a bunch of data, getting all these analytics, looking at all of them and realizing it doesn't tell me anything. I can't do anything with this data. So then we had to go backwards and whittle our way down to the question of, okay, I want a metric or a data point to tell me this, because if I know this, I can do that. If you ask yourself those questions and you figure out what exactly you're going to do with the data, what's the intent behind collecting it, it's worth collecting. If you can't answer those questions, don't waste your time doing something you won't get any fruits of your labor out of. It's not worth it. And I would recommend starting small, grab a data set you know you're going to use because you want it, and work your way up from there.
Super insightful. And it took me about 3 years to figure that out in Smartsheet. So
That's
where were
about
you?
It's about 3 years.
So thank you so much for sharing your use case. What we're going to go ahead and do now is go into the breakout. So that's where I encourage you to go off mute and turn on your video if you feel comfortable, but no pressure otherwise. But we'll be seeing that prompt coming up.